There's science behind the idea that it's not matter that's emitting field, an electromagnetic field. It's actually that field that is actually creating matter. So if you change information in the field, you literally can change matter. The matter is the hologram from singularity. In order to do that, you have to understand the science of brain and heart coherence, and you have to practice and understand how to connect to the field. And by the end of the week, of a week-long event, many people know how to get beyond themselves, and we have research to prove they can do it. Our research shows that if you trade those emotions of fear, worry, of anxiety, of any vigilance, and you can open your heart, and if you can begin to feel gratitude and appreciation and settle your body into the present moment, 4 days feeling an elevated emotion would actually strengthen your immune system by about 50%. We've done the research to show that once energy makes it into your heart, the body begins to, it's so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the emotion you're feeling by thought alone and some emotion you would feel from some reaction in your environment. Your body in that state is beginning to believe it's safe enough to relax into the present moment. When that occurs, the immune system begins to upregulate, and it begins to make these antibodies. Those antibodies are the body's natural defense against bacteria and viruses. They're the shields that protect the body from foreign invaders. And 4 days of doing that, imagine if you practice doing that every single day. I think by working with your body and elevating your emotional state, you could literally become more resistant or more in a state of order, independent of your outer environment. In order for that to happen, you're actually sending a signal, new information to your immune system to begin to become prosperous, to begin to grow, to begin to repair, to begin to gain more energy. And so the army, the inner army, becomes more abundant. It becomes more awakened. It becomes more alive. And that's when energy makes it into our heart and we feel more whole. And that's when we begin to reset the baseline of anxiety in our brain and body, and the immune system begins to really do its natural job. Most people have a reaction to something in their outer world, and when they have an event that has a strong emotional charge, the change in their internal chemistry causes them to narrow their focus on the cause of it, and the brain takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. And so the brain is kind of a record of past memories, and the body emotionally feels those memories. And so many times the signal emotionally from the event begins to select a gene that begins to downregulate. And every time the person thinks about the past event over and over again, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body. And stimulus and response, thought and feeling, image and emotion is conditioning the body into the past. So it begins to program the gene. And the gene starts to make cheaper proteins. It downregulates, and enzymes and hormones, and the body starts moving further out of balance. And so the person then thinks neurologically within the memory of that experience and feels chemically within those emotions, and how they think and feel is their state of being. So many times the gene starts to be activated after a strong emotional event. So then how could we begin to change that gene expression? So it would make sense then if you could feel an elevated emotion and you could combine a coherent brain with an elevated emotion and combine those two. And you can teach people how to be so present that they can begin to see a new future or imagine a new future. There comes a moment that if they did it properly, if they started feeling the emotion of that event before it took place. In other words, you can't wait for your healing to feel wholeness. You can't wait for some type of physical change to feel gratitude. That's living in separation or lack. That's waiting for something out there to tell you you're changed in order for you to feel that kind of separation or emptiness taken away. But if you start to feel the emotion, the stronger the emotion you feel from the inner event, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind. In a sense now, you're changing your brain and body from living in the past present reality to living in a future present reality. In other words, the stronger the emotion you feel, if the emotion of ecstasy or bliss or freedom is greater than the quotient of betrayal or shock or pain from the past, now the body is literally no longer in the past, it's in a new future. And the stronger the emotion you feel, instead of paying attention to the picture in your outer world, if you're truly in a state of meditation, your body is so objective that it's believing that future event is happening in the present moment because you're feeling the emotion of that event. And that begins to select and instruct new genes, and genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, and the expression of protein becomes the expression of life. And we have seen people have an inner event that transforms them to such a degree that all of the shock and betrayal that happened in their past, they look back at their entire past and they say, I don't want to change anything about my past because it brought me to this moment. I understand why I had to go through all of that to finally feel this. It was worth it. And they're betrayers, they're abusers, they have nothing but compassion and love for them. They're seeing it from a different level of consciousness, not from the same emotion. And the memory without the emotional charge is wisdom, and the person now no longer is living in the past. And so that's what we want people to experience. That inner event is so real that it replaces the circuitry, the gene expression of the past into a new program of the future. If you take a person and you have them close their eyes and mentally rehearse doing bicep curls in their mind, and they come for 1 hour a day into a clinic, and you add the emotional component of stronger, harder, more intense, and they practice that with their eyes closed, never lifting a weight. At the end of 2 weeks, their muscle strength increases by 13.5%. So that means then, when we're truly present and we add an emotional component, if you can do it in the present moment and stay present and repeat it over and over again, when the brain is in the present moment, it will not know the difference between the real life event of contracting your muscles and doing it in your mind. And your brain will begin to look like you've been doing it all along, and you begin to activate new circuits in your brain. And if you repeat it, you fire and wire it, more circuits begins to create a neurological network, a new level of mind. So the research shows then that people who never played the piano before, you can divide them into two categories. And you can do a brain scan on one group of people and then set them in front of a piano and teach them one-handed scales and chords. And they come for 2 hours a day and they practice those scales and chords for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, they rescan their brain, and lo and behold, they grow new circuits on the opposite side of the brain. No magic there. You learn something new. Learning is making new synaptic connections. You get some instruction. You got to get your body involved. You get your body involved, you're going to have a new experience. Experience enriches the brain. Pay attention to what you're doing. You got to pay attention and stay present and repeat it over and over again, firing and wiring. You're going to assemble new neural architecture. We can take another group of people, have them close their eyes, and mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords for 2 hours a day for 5 days. Scan their brain before and scan their brain after. At the end of 5 days, they grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people who were physically doing it. Now, what that means is if you take those people and you set them in front of the piano without ever lifting a finger, they can play those scales and chords. Why? Because they prime their brain for a future behavior. So if you truly wanted to change some aspect of yourself, then you would have to ask yourself, who do I want to be when I open my eyes? Now, the act of answering that question is going to turn on your frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe has connections to all other parts of the brain. And it's interested in answering that question because it is the creative center. So as it begins to scan the landscape of the brain, it can only gather information from things you've intellectually learned or things you've experienced in your life. And it begins to associate those different memories with the question. And when you get enough networks of neurons firing in your brain, you see an image or a picture. That's intention. And then as you begin to live and rehearse who you're going to be, you begin to do that exact same thing. You begin to install neurological hardware in your brain. Repeat it, it becomes a software program, and you begin to behave that way. Now the brain is primed. It's no longer a record of the past. It's a map to the future. Now the person can feel the emotions of their future. You're going to see a person move into a different state of being, and they are going to have all kinds of biological changes. And that begins to change their biology every single day. Some people do it faster, some people do it slower, but your muscle will get stronger. That's for certain. You will make more connections between your brain and that muscle. That's for certain. And then if you did specific physical exercises while you practiced the mental rehearsal, the physical demonstration of contracting those muscles begins to make more connection because of the experience. So now you're hitting it from both ends. Let me just say that the majority of the thoughts that we think every single day are the same thoughts as we thought yesterday. In fact, 90% of them are. And the same thoughts leading to the same choices leading to the same behaviors creating the same experiences, and the same experiences producing the same feelings and emotions begins to cause our biology to become very similar, very same. And the repetition of that and firing and wiring then creates automatic programs in the brain and body. And 95% of who we are is a state of unconscious or subconscious programs where we've done something so many times that the body now can actually do it automatically without the conscious mind. So then if you truly wanted to change and you understood that your personality creates your personal reality, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, and the present personality who's listening to this has created the present personal reality called their life. That means if they wanted to create a new personal reality, a new life, they would have to begin to change their personality. They'd have to change themselves. And most people then try to create a new personal reality as the same personality. It doesn't work. So then if you're sitting in your meditation and you ask yourself the question, who do I want to be when I open my eyes? What is the greatest expression of myself? And you said, okay, let me remind myself of how I no longer want to think. You know, the thoughts like, it's too hard, I'll never change, I'll never get what I want. Let me become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that I wouldn't let that thought slip by my awareness today unnoticed by me and program my autonomic nervous system in a specific outcome. And then if you said, how would I want to speak today? How do I want to act? How do I want to behave? And you reminded yourself how you weren't going to act and how you weren't going to behave. And you became conscious of those unconscious habits to such a degree you wouldn't go unconscious and behave in the same way. That's when you're no longer the program. Now your consciousness observing the program. And if you said, when does my energy drop? What do I feel when I feel those typical familiar emotions? What are they? Let me name them, just so I'm so aware of them that when my energy drops, I can catch myself in that moment and not return back to the same familiar emotions and cause my body to believe it's back in the past. And we can't see a new future from the past. So that process then is what I call getting beyond the old self. And it's a disentangling from the program. The word meditation means to become familiar with. So as you sit there and become familiar with those states of mind and body, you begin to objectify your subjective self. Now, you are becoming so aware of the unconscious programs, you won't go unconscious, and that's the first step to change. And then what if you said, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What thoughts do I want to put my attention behind and begin to install the new circuitry, the new hardware? And if I keep my attention on it and I fire and wire those thoughts, it's going to begin to become a software program, and that's going to be the new voice in my head. That's going to be the voice that's telling me, the new program, that you can, that it is possible. And then if you said, how am I going to act in my day with my children today, in relationships with everybody? What does honor look like? What does nobility look like? What does respect look like? What does reverence look like for life? How can I be more compassionate? And you began to think about how you were going to behave in that day. If you did it properly, just like those piano players, just like those muscle exercisers, you would begin to install more neurological hardware in your brain. And if you kept doing it, it would become the software program, and you, as I said, would behave that way. And then bringing on that elevated emotion then, and teaching your body what your future feels like before it's happened, and understanding that the body's so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real life experience and the experience you create by emotion. That means then, if the environment signals the gene and the end product of the experience in the environment is an emotion, you could signal the gene ahead of the environment if you feel this emotion. And if you understand that, you would assign meaning to it, and you wouldn't get up until you felt it. Now, I would say then, if you kept practicing this, you would begin to neurochemically condition your mind and body into a new state of being. And that would begin to become more familiar to you. And you would begin to think differently, begin to act differently, and you would begin to feel differently. And that's a new personality. And many people who heal in this work, when they get on the stage and they say, we say, well, where did it go? Where did the cancer go? Where did the Parkinson's go? And they say, hey, I think it belongs in the old personality. I'm somebody else. There's a change in biology and chemistry as a result of it.